The Ohio Farm Bureau podcast at Pork Congress with Nick Seger, president of the Ohio Pork Council, and another big event here in Lima. The second year here. What makes Lima so appealing for this particular conference?
We just need to be by the producers, and moving from Columbus to Lima, Ohio, we get a lot closer to a lot of the hog farms, the guys in the barns, the guys managing the farm. Granted, there's hogs all over the state of Ohio, and we need to represent everybody, but we thought we'd give it a chance on the western side with a little bit more dense population with the pigs.
Boy, it's successful. There are a lot of people here enjoying the trade show, getting ready for some important breakout sessions. We'll have a couple of those guests talking about foreign animal diseases and that human and animal connection with diseases as well, coming up a little bit later on in the podcast. Tell me about the farm. Your farm.
Farm with my dad and two uncles, Fort Laramie, Sydney area, farrow to finish, and we also have a wean to finish operation. Grow corn, beans, wheat, and alfalfa, and I have some cousins in the operation as well. So,
the message here at the 2023 Pork Congress is pretty heavy on the biosecurity, and for good reason. And Nick, I know that on your farm, you take that very seriously, as do all pork producers in Ohio, but why is it becoming so much more important to have these types of conversations?
Well, you know, the threat of foreign animal disease has always been there, but the last few years has been a very heightened risk with, African swine fever in other countries, and hopefully it does not come to the U.S. or Ohio, but we need to be prepared. So we're always very concerned with biosecurity, but now is even more important than probably ever in our life.
What are some of the measures that you have to put in place in order to protect your animals, and what are some of the resources that are out there for Ohio farmers across the state?
A lot of facilities are shower in, shower out, downtime in between travel, other farms, boots, disinfectant. It's quite a process, but there again, it's a process. Everybody needs to do all the little steps and just think about where we go and what we're doing.
Like all sections of agriculture, we have our ups and we have our downs depending on if you grow livestock, corn, beans, or wheat, what have you in agriculture. Give me a recap of 2022, if you will, about the economy for pork producers.
Well, it's agriculture. It's always a roller coaster. I mean, we have our good times. We've came off some decent hog prices, and here recently the market has been kind of sliding down. Everybody's got their take on what that is, and tomorrow here at the awards luncheon, we do have two speakers to give us an economic outlook for that. So another good reason to attend tomorrow or today. But it's just farming. It's always kind of the mantra at home. It's farming. It's going to be ups and downs, and you just you're in it for the long haul. So I guess that's kind of the recap.
Of course, we have some safety nets in agriculture, and we're working on a new farm bill here in 2023. Hopefully it gets done here in 2023. As a pork producer, we hear a lot about the farm bill and commodity programs, Title I, but as a hog producer, what are some of the things that you keep an eye on and you're pushing for as an organization as far as this farm bill is concerned?
It stems back to one of the main things is worrying about biosecurity, trying to keep the funding for the Beagle Brigade at the ports to try and, if you're not familiar, sniffing out any pork products that could potentially come in, all those type things.
The Beagle Brigade, I had never heard of that, but
yes.
Very important though, because as much as we try to keep those diseases coming from farm to farm, we're in a global society now, and our country's tied together with so many other countries around the world that taking those security measures even before they get into the U.S. equally important.
Correct. Yes. There is some African swine fever in Dominican Republic. Very popular destination for a lot of people with vacations. A lot of people coming back to the U.S. and there's a lot of risk there of, we need to make sure there's downtime and products don't come back and we keep it off of the continent. So,
if you knew how busy these farmers were year in and year out, you'd be amazed that he has time to be here in a suit and tie at Pork Congress. But Why, Nick, do you take a leadership role in Ohio Pork Council?
We've been fortunate to have a lot of pork producers over the years step up and take that time away from their home operation. I'm lucky I have a family that allows me to come here. It's one of them things of you want to be involved, you want to give back. I can think of a lot of the names back in the hometown that did a lot for ag or swine. There's a lot of guys at the state level that have done a lot. And being involved, I get to basically be mentored by them. So, I don't know, it's giving back and bettering myself some too. So hopefully my kids, I have 5 kids now, 3 boys, or 3 girls, 2 boys, and hopefully they want to be in ag and continue for another generation. So,
just like all the other farmers, pretty humble. Nick Seger, president of the Ohio Pork Council. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you having us here at Pork Congress, and best of luck here in 2023 as we see even more challenges, but with those challenges come more opportunities.
Thanks, Ty.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
As I mentioned with the president of the Ohio Pork Council earlier in the podcast, Nick Seger, biosecurity is really the talk of this year's Pork Congress. And who better to ask about biosecurity around Ohio than the state veterinarian? Dr. Dennis Summers joins us. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the opportunity.
Talking about FAD, foreign animal diseases, and we'll talk about HPAI. You and I talked about avian influenza a little bit in 2022 with that outbreak we had in Northwest Ohio, but you know, we live in such a global society. Everything from our markets to our money to our goods, ideas, they're all on a global scale. And so obviously that comes into play as far as animal agriculture as well. And that's why FADs are becoming more and more prevalent.
That's right, they are. I mean, we live in a world now where you can move products anywhere in the world in under 24 hours. These diseases, whether it's HPAI or any foreign animal disease, what that might be, they look like normal diseases. And so these diseases have a great way of finding adaptation and survivability. And so a lot of them have found ways over the years to look like normal diseases. So, I mean, it really is an ever constant threat and presence nationally. You know, we still have the safest food supply in the world. We've got the best ag economy in the world, but we also have vulnerabilities. We are vulnerable just as any other country. But with the amount, as you mentioned, with the amount of global movement, how fast you can move products, the amount of people coming in and out of our borders and in and out of our country, we need to be really ever present and vigilant about keeping you know, our animal ag industries safe.
As far as African swine fever, it's relatively close in the Dominican Republic right now. And, you know, as much as we'd make the news if it got into the U.S., I think there should be headlines about how farmers are using biosecurity measures on their farm to keep it out of the U.S. It really is quite a task to be able to thwart an effort like that as close as it is.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it goes everywhere from just the single backyard producer that can do their part all the way up to the national level. That would be our USDA counterparts as well. And anybody that can do anything to try to keep disease off your premise, that's what we want you to do. You know, we've got our national borders, we've got our national plans with USDA and Customs and Border Protection. They do a great job of checking, you know, those areas along our southern borders to make sure that we're safe there. But that's not where it stops. That can't be your only barrier. So biosecurity is the quintessential. It's a word we use all the time. We say the biosecurity all the time, to the point sometimes you just kind of almost dismiss it in a way because you hear it so much. But it is the fundamental thought and process of keeping infection off of your premise. And it's fluid, it's adaptable, it's got to be changing, it's never a one size fits all, and you've got to review it periodically. You've got to sit down and say, what am I doing different now? Because ag has changed in the last 10 years or 20 years, or it's not the way my dad did it. So you've got to be really cognizant of that. And biosecurity is the number one thing we can do to prevent those diseases from coming on.
We can learn from our past. Technology, of course, gets better, but we can also learn from other industries. You were on the job a very short time when the third largest outbreak of HPAI in the U.S. happened right here in the Buckeye State. And of course, there are a lot of challenges with that and a lot of work for you and your department to do, and that farmer in particular to do. When it comes to what we learned from HPAI here in Ohio, can that translate to other industries like pork and other livestock aspects of Ohio?
Absolutely, absolutely. I use the term. We spent so much time we never had an actual HPAI. We've never had an actual legitimate HPAI detection in Ohio. Yes, and I'd had less than maybe just over 1 year on the job as state veterinarian before we had the third biggest outbreak, and so it was really an ability for us to sit down and take what we knew in an academic setting that we've been doing tabletop exercises on and put it into practice. And there were some steep learning curves on the front end. But at the end of the day, we've been through one now, we've seen what it's like, we actually know what the hurdles are. So we do want to take that information, and it is translatable to other livestock industries. We absolutely want to be able to take what we've learned from HPAI and transition that into information we can feed to the pork industry, information we can feed to the cattle industry, and even turn around and give it back to the poultry industry as well. So we continue to use that information, but it is really one of those things where we have to be able to get in front of producers that can understand and say, hey, we learned a hard lesson here that X, Y, and Z were major bottlenecks. We didn't realize how hard of a job it was to get this moving forward. And there's lots of different variables, but absolutely translatable into other industries, and we want to be able to provide that information to them.
What were some of those lessons?
Well, the biggest lessons was, in my mind, the reliance on multiple modalities, for depopulation, right? It's never something we like to talk about, but it's part of the response. It's our regulatory duty to eradicate disease. But having multiple modalities happening at the same time keeps the speed at which you can contain the virus manageable, right? That's a lesson that we learned. We need to be able to take what we learned from HPI and go to our pork industry partners and say, hey, look, take what you say you think you only want to do one specific method. You're going to have to start thinking of 2 or 3 simultaneous methods because you've got to keep the speed up. Because the longer that the depopulation takes, the more likely the virus is to spread, the more likely it is that your biocontainment is going to fail, and all of a sudden you jeopardize now your industry partners, right? And so that's a lesson that we learned. Second lesson we learned was, as helpful as our federal counterparts were, just getting contracts and vendors and cooperative agreements in place to allow money to start transferring to move those processes forward was not expeditious. We need to start doing more on the front load that and prepare them to have some of that stuff in place. And the third one was the vast amount of space that is needed to dispose of all that biological material. Definitely caught me on my heels as we sat back and we sit back and we look at what we've done. The amount of land space, the amount of mulch and carbon sources that are needed to execute a successful disposal response was way more than we thought. And so we try to take those lessons of, you think you know what you want to do, but actually sit down and crunch the numbers and figure out how much you're going to need. I think you'd be shocked at how much more is going to be needed there. So.
And those challenges were a small animal, and now you've got to take those calculations and put it into a larger hog or even cattle, and boy, it doesn't take long to get to a size of a farm that you're going to see these types of
Absolutely.
challenges.
Yeah, there's tons of heavy equipment that needs to come on. I mean, maybe you have to build a new access road to get all this heavy equipment on if it's raining, which we experienced. Equipment doesn't work well in mud. All those little subtle nuances that slow the process down. How do you get 70 tons of gravel in an instant? It's not always readily available. So, lots of little things that become big things as the response continues, because they end up being small, like these little barriers that you have to get over. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. We want to be able to take that information, these lessons learned, and share it with our other livestock industries.
Taking a big step in the right direction as far as food security here in Ohio with the Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory. We have a really strong system here in Ohio, but it's going to get even stronger with funding from last year's biennial budget. New facilities there at ODA. Tell me about where we are in that process and what we can expect as we continue to build this new ADD.
You're right, Ty. So we did get generously funded by the taxpayers of Ohio. We're very generous, very grateful for that. $72 million. It's going to give us a new diagnostic lab. We are rocking and rolling and moving forward as fast as we can with getting the architectural firm and the construction firms all kind of settled out. We've already begun multiple conversations of design and trying to harness down, you're trying to cone down what you want this facility to look like and what you need, right? So we're sitting down with the architects now, we're sitting down with the construction company to start saying this is the size of the footprint that we're looking for, this is the kind of equipment, this is the amount of space. And the key things that we're trying to keep in mind with the new diagnostic lab is the lab needs to be built, and we all recognize that it needs to be built, in my mind, 10 years ahead of where we are now, right? So we need to be able to have this surge capacity as the industries continue to grow and their businesses expand, that we have this buffer capacity. This is this ability for us to absorb more, and we have the ability to expand, right? So we're already thinking now, even with $72 million, we may want to have an expansion project in 15 or 20 years. Do we have the land access? So, we're excited. The lab's going to be built on ODA campus there between us and the Fire Marshal Academy. So we've really got a nice spot set. So yeah, we're making as fast a movement as we can. We've got to get it done by December of 2026.
I want to take a step back for those that don't know what ADDL does.
ADDL stands for the Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab. It's the state's Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab. It is a non-lab, so it gives us the ability to run specific regulatory tests for reportable diseases that are of national, economic, and livestock significance. Okay, that's kind of the short version of it. But it is a state lab, so when it comes to certain tests that have to be done, only ADDL can do them. We also offer multiple diagnostic tests that are outside of regulatory diseases that help to support and keep our industries thriving. When the lab was built in the early 60s, originally, it was this little tiny building that was built to help eradicate TB and brucellosis and pseudorabies. But as time has gone on, diseases have changed. Reportable diseases are added to your list. As you mentioned earlier with FADs, diseases come on board that are of significance. So as it continues to grow, but yeah, our lab is the one that does a lot of that. We do get a lot of testing that comes to support the products that we consume every day. And so it's a really important lab to keep thriving and to keep it moving forward in the next 20, 25 years.
Something Ohio Farm Bureau and our members lobbied heavily for, to
Absolutely.
be able to get a state-of-the-art facility in Ohio and continue to lead the way as far as food security goes.
That's right.
Let's talk about resources before I let you go. All of these organizations, Ohio Pork Council, Ohio Cattlemen's Beef Association, all the individual commodity groups have resources to keep their farms and their employees and their animals safe and secure on the farm. What types of resources do you folks at ODA offer for those producers?
A lot of the resources we have can be anything from diagnostic services, right? So we always want to be able to offer any diagnostics that we can. We also want to be able to have the ability to offer new diagnostics. So if a new disease is coming on, it may not be reportable, but if you want to test for it, we want to be able to offer it to you. So we want to be able to support Ohio, right? To keep, Ohio supports each other. So we want to be able to continue to offer that. The other resources that we have, we really want to engage now on a new campaign moving forward. As I mentioned earlier about, when the lab was built, it was all about disease eradication. Well, we don't really have that many diseases in Ohio anymore that constantly need eradicated. When they pop up, we stamp them out. But right now, in my mind, as state veterinarian, I would like to look for the next 20 years to be about emergency response preparedness, preparing our industries for foreign animal disease, and about preventive medicine. We're a public health agency. So we want to be able to offer resources in terms of actual manpower, like be able to sit down with producers and say, here, tap into our brains of the things that we know, and we want to be able to help you be prepared. So it's much more of a transitional thought of moving from disease eradication efforts of livestock to public health, preventive medicine, and emergency response. So, we offer anytime anybody wants us to come out and meet with them and sit down and talk about anything, we're more than happy to do it. Lots of outreach in terms of anything from like new ID tags and new platforms that are coming on board with those types of things. Interstate movement records, all that stuff tends to change from time to time. So we're always here to offer those resources to them too. But by and large, the diagnostic lab is the pinnacle resource to be able to provide them timely tests, accurate tests, so they can keep their products moving.
Always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.
Dr. Dennis Summers, State Veterinarian with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, joining us this week on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. If you like what you hear, make sure and like, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, I'm Ty Higgins. We'll see you down the road.